Ashes of the Coalition. The stars themselves seemed to weep as the last Coalition warship exploded into 1,000 glowing fragments. For 300 years, the Galactic Coalition had maintained peace across 17 species and thousands of worlds. Now, in just 6 months, it lay in ruins. The Tyrannic's hegemony had done what everyone thought impossible. They had broken the back of civilization itself. Commander Zactor floated among the debris field that had once been the Coalition's proudest fleet. His secondary arms twitched nervously as he watched the Tyrannic's dreadnoughts methodically destroying escape pods. The Coalition had made one fatal error. They had believed in honor, in rules of war, in the basic decency that bound civilized species together. The Tyrannics believed in none of these things. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, her voice crackling through damaged speakers, "we're receiving a transmission on the old emergency frequency." Zactor's compound eyes focused on the display. The signal was weak, barely detectable, but it carried the Coalition's final automated distress beacon. It would travel to every known system, every recorded civilization, crying out into the void for help that would never come. Who would dare challenge the Tyrannics now? Light years away, in a small blue world that the Coalition had dismissed as primitive and not ready for contact, that signal found unexpected ears. Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up the transmission, and within hours, it reached the highest levels of the United Earth Defense Force. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled chiefs of staff, her weathered face illuminated by holographic displays showing the destruction of the Coalition. For decades, humanity had quietly observed the galactic community from the shadows, learning, preparing, advancing their technology in ways the Coalition's peaceful scientists could never imagine. "They never knew we were watching," Vasquez said quietly. "The Coalition detected our radio signals a century ago and decided we were too primitive to contact. They planned to revisit us in another 1,000 years." She paused, her jaw tightening. "They won't get that chance." General Morrison leaned forward. "Admiral, with respect, this isn't our fight. The Coalition ignored us, dismissed us. Why should we risk everything for them?" Vasquez turned to face him, her eyes hard as steel. "Because, General, the Tyrannics won't stop with the Coalition. Our analysis shows they're expansionist, aggressive. In 50 years, maybe less, they'll find Earth. And when they do, we'll face them alone, just like the Coalition is facing them now." She activated another display. "But more than that. Look at these images. Look at what they're doing to civilian populations." The room fell silent as scenes of devastation played out. Entire worlds burned. Refugee ships hunted down like animals. Children of a dozen species crying over the bodies of their parents. "We are humanity," Vasquez continued. "We may be young by galactic standards, but we have something the Coalition lost: the will to fight when fighting is necessary. And by God, if there was ever a time when fighting was necessary, it's now." 3 weeks later, Earth's hidden fleet, ships built in secret beneath the surfaces of moons and asteroids, powered up their engines for the first time. Humanity had spent a century reverse engineering alien technology from crashed probes and distant observations. They had combined it with their own innovations, creating something neither purely human nor purely alien, but uniquely effective. The UES Retribution, flagship of Earth's expeditionary force, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of what had been Coalition space. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge, surrounded by the best and brightest humanity had to offer. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, facing an enemy that had just destroyed the greatest military alliance in galactic history. By any reasonable measure, they were sailing to their deaths. And yet, not one of them hesitated. "Admiral," Communications Officer James McCarthy reported, "we're picking up multiple distress signals. There are survivors out there. Coalition ships, civilian vessels, escape pods." "Then we start there," Vasquez decided. "Plot a course to the nearest signal. Let's show the galaxy that someone still gives a damn." The first survivors they rescued could hardly believe their eyes. The battered remnants of a coalition science vessel, drifting powerless in space, watched in amazement as the human ship appeared. To them, it was like seeing ghosts. The primitive humans, here in the depths of space, with technology that seemed impossible. "By the 7 stars," whispered Dr. Veltak, the ranking survivor, as she was brought aboard the Retribution. You're humans, from Earth. But how? "We've been watching," Vasquez explained simply. "Learning. Preparing. And now we're here to help." Word spread quickly through the survivor networks. The humans had come. The impossible had happened. The primitive species from the Outer Rim had somehow developed space travel and was rescuing coalition survivors. But more than that, they were fighting back. The first real test came at Kepler Station, a massive refueling depot now under Tyrannic's control. 3 hegemony destroyers orbited the station, using it as a forward base for their expansion into former coalition territory. Captain Marcus Chen commanded the strike force, 3 human frigates against superior numbers. By conventional tactics, it was suicide. But humanity hadn't survived on their violent world by being conventional. "Launch the WASPs," Chen ordered. From the bellies of the human ships, swarms of tiny drones emerged. Each no bigger than a basketball, they were virtually invisible to Tyrannic sensors, designed to exploit a weakness human engineers had identified in hegemony shield technology. The drones attached themselves to the enemy hulls like parasites, burrowing through armor with molecular disassemblers. The Tyrannic's commander, Warlord Crix, watched his tactical display in confusion. "What are these tiny signals?" "Some kind of debris." His answer came when the WASPs reached critical mass. In perfect synchronization, they detonated their payload, not explosives, but EMP charges that cascaded through Tyrannic systems like a virus. Shields flickered and died. Weapons went offline. Engines sputtered into silence. "Now," Chen commanded. The human ships struck with precision, their railguns and plasma weapons tearing through the suddenly vulnerable Tyrannic's vessels. In minutes, it was over. 3 hegemony destroyers, each the size of a city block, drifted as lifeless hulks. Aboard the station, coalition prisoners watched in disbelief as human marines stormed through the corridors. These weren't the peaceful explorers the coalition had expected humanity to become. These were warriors, trained from birth on a world where competition and conflict had driven evolution itself. "Secure the survivors," Sergeant Sarah Cooper ordered her squad. "And somebody raise our flag. Let the Tyrannics know humanity has entered the war." The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The Tyrannics had built their entire strategy on fear, on the certainty that no one would dare oppose them after the coalition's fall. Now, videos of human soldiers liberating prison camps spread through the galaxy's underground networks. The primitive species was doing what the advanced civilizations couldn't. They were winning. But it was more than just military victories. Humanity brought something else, something the galaxy had almost forgotten: hope. Coalition survivors spoke in amazement of human medics working tirelessly to save alien lives, of human engineers sharing technology freely, of human soldiers standing between refugees and danger without hesitation. "They fight like demons," one rescued coalition admiral reported, "but they show mercy like angels. They are what we should have been." The Tyrannic's hegemony had crushed the greatest military alliance in galactic history. They had thought themselves invincible, unstoppable. They believed the war was over. They were about to learn what finished really meant when humanity decided to get involved. Humanity's wrath unleashed. The Battle of Kepler Station was just the beginning. Within weeks, human strike forces appeared throughout former coalition space like phantoms, hitting Tyrannic supply lines, liberating prison camps, and evacuating survivors. The hegemony's leadership, safe in their fortress world of Tyros Prime, initially dismissed these attacks as mere pinpricks, annoying but ultimately meaningless. They had no idea what was coming. Admiral Vasquez stood in the war room aboard the Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of the conflict. Human forces were outnumbered, outgunned, but they were winning through superior tactics and sheer determination. "The Tyranics fight like they're following a script," observed Colonel David Reed, Earth's leading expert on alien military doctrine. "They're used to enemies who follow predictable patterns, who fight by established rules. We don't." Vasquez nodded. "Our entire military history is built on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations. The Tyranics have superior firepower, but they've never faced an enemy like us." The next phase of humanity's campaign showcased this perfectly. Instead of engaging Tyranics fleets in direct combat, human forces began a campaign of surgical strikes designed to shatter enemy morale. They targeted command ships, leaving Tyranics fleets leaderless and confused. They'd broadcasted recordings of liberated prisoners on all frequencies, showing the galaxy that the hegemony could be beaten. But it was the rescue of the Coalition Council that truly changed everything. Deep beneath the ruins of the Coalition capital world, the surviving members of the Galactic Council had been held as trophies by the Tyranic Supreme Warlord. Their public execution was to be the final symbol of hegemony dominance. Instead, it became the stage for humanity's most audacious operation yet. Captain Marcus Chen led the assault personally, using stealth technology adapted from Coalition designs, but enhanced with human innovation. His team infiltrated the most heavily guarded facility in Tyranic space. They moved like shadows through corridors patrolled by hegemony's elite guards, using tactics honed in Earth's Special Forces training facilities. "Remember," Chen whispered to his team as they approached the detention center, "we're not just rescuing prisoners, we're sending a message." The message was delivered with devastating clarity. In 30 minutes of precisely coordinated action, Chen's team eliminated over 200 Tyranics guards, rescued all 17 council members, and escaped without losing a single operative. But the real blow came afterward, when humanity broadcasted footage of the rescue across every communication network in the galaxy. Supreme Warlord Vrax watched the footage from his throne room, his forearms trembling with rage. Around him, his generals stood in terrified silence. "How?" Vrax demanded. "How do these primitives continue to humiliate us? We crushed the Coalition. We are supreme." General Korth, boldest of his commanders, dared to speak. "Supreme One, these humans, they don't fight like the Coalition. They strike from shadow. They use deception. They are mortal." Vrax roared. "They can be killed. Assemble the Grand Fleet. We will crush their homeworld and end this insult to our supremacy." But humanity wasn't waiting for the Tyranics to come to them. As the hegemony assembled its greatest fleet, human forces were already moving. Operation Damocles, as Vasquez had named it, was about to begin. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Tyros Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Where Coalition ships had been elegant and sophisticated, human vessels were brutal in their efficiency. The Dreadnought Vengeance, humanity's largest warship, bristled with weapons that seemed crude by galactic standards, but proved devastatingly effective. "Supreme Warlord," a panicked voice reported from Tyranics Fleet Command. "The human ships, they're not forming standard battle lines. They're doing something else." Indeed they were. Human vessels scattered across the system in what seemed like chaos, but was actually a carefully orchestrated dance. Smaller ships launched waves of those strange drone weapons. Larger vessels positioned themselves at key points around Tyros Prime's defensive grid. Then came the broadcasts. Not military communications, but something far more insidious. On every Tyranics frequency, in every language of the hegemony, human voices began to speak. To the citizens of the Tyranics hegemony, the message began: "We are humanity. Your leaders told you we were primitive. They told you we were weak. They lied." Images followed. Footage of human victories, of liberated prisoners, of Tyranics generals surrendering. But more than that, images of the atrocities committed by the hegemony against coalition civilians. Your leaders made you complicit in genocide. The broadcast continued. But we offer you a choice. Lay down your arms. Surrender your warlords. Join the community of civilized species, or face the consequences of your actions. It was psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never witnessed. Within hours, revolts began on Tyrannic's colony worlds. Slave species rose up against their masters. Even within the hegemony's own ranks, doubt began to spread. Vrax ordered his grand fleet to attack, but human tactics continued to confound them. Where Tyrannic's commanders expected massive fleet engagements, humans struck with hit-and-run attacks. They used the system's asteroid fields for cover, turned the hegemony's own orbital defenses against them with cyber warfare, and slowly, methodically, dismantled the greatest military force in the galaxy. The final battle came not in space, but on the surface of Tyros Prime itself. As Tyrannic's fleet burned in orbit, human drop pods fell like rain onto the hegemony's capital. Marines in powered armor stormed through streets where no enemy had walked in 10,000 years. Supreme Warlord Vrax made his last stand in the hegemony's ancient citadel, surrounded by his most loyal guards. He expected a brutal assault, a massacre worthy of his own reputation. Instead, a single human walked through his doors. Admiral Elena Vasquez herself, flanked by the rescued Coalition Council members. "Vrax of Tyros," she said formally, "by the authority vested in me by United Earth and the surviving members of the Galactic Coalition, I place you under arrest for crimes against sentience." You cannot," Vrax sputtered. "I am the Supreme Warlord. I command the greatest military in the galaxy." "Commanded," Vasquez corrected. Past tense. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is in revolt. Your war is over." She stepped forward, looking up at the massive alien without fear. "You made one fatal error, Vrax. You assumed that because we were young, we were weak. But humanity grew strong in struggle. We learned war before we learned peace, and when we saw what you did to those who couldn't defend themselves, we remembered why we fight." The arrest of Supreme Warlord Vrax was broadcast across the galaxy. The being who had terrorized 1,000 worlds, who had broken the coalition and thought himself invincible, was led away in chains by the species he had dismissed as primitive. In the weeks that followed, the true extent of humanity's victory became clear. They hadn't just defeated the Tyrannic's military. They had shattered the entire philosophy of might makes right that the hegemony represented. Across the galaxy, oppressed species rose up. Former coalition worlds began to rebuild, and at the center of it all stood humanity, not as conquerors, but as liberators. The new Galactic Council convened on neutral ground, with representatives from over 30 species. Admiral Vasquez stood before them, still wearing her combat uniform. "Humanity doesn't seek to rule," she said simply. "We've seen what happens when power becomes its own purpose. We offer instead a simple promise. We will stand with those who seek peace, and we will stand against those who would destroy it." The Council's response was unanimous. Humanity was offered full membership, with a permanent seat on the Security Council. More than that, they were asked to lead the new coalition's military forces. "You fought when no one else would," Council Chairman Zactor said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us when we had given up hope. The galaxy needs protectors, and you have proven yourselves worthy of that responsibility." As Vasquez accepted on behalf of Earth, she thought of all they had accomplished. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as conquerors or subjects, but as something far more important, as proof that courage and determination could overcome any odds. The Tyrannic's hegemony had thought the war was over. They had crushed the coalition and believed their victory complete. But they had awakened something far more dangerous than any military alliance. They had awakened humanity's sense of justice. And when humanity decided to finish something, it stayed finished. In the years that followed, the galaxy would speak in hushed tones of the war of liberation. They would tell stories of human soldiers who fought like demons but showed mercy to the defeated. They would remember how a young species from a distant world had reminded them all what it meant to stand up to tyranny. But most of all, they would remember the lesson humanity taught them. That finished didn't mean when the fighting stopped. It meant when the job was done, when the innocent were safe, when justice was served. The Tyrannics had crushed the Galactic Coalition, but humanity had crushed something far more important, the idea that might alone makes right. And in doing so, they had not just won a war. They had changed the galaxy forever. The stars no longer wept. Thanks to humanity, they had learned to hope again.